Okay, so lately I've actually seen a lot of conversations about levers in M plus and talking about the toxicity in the WoW player base in regards to levers inside of dungeons, talking about opportunities to be able to punish people who leave a key. What a lever is effectively somebody who starts a dungeon in your group, and then after something happens in that dungeon, they leave the key before it is finished. A lot of people believe that the key is still either timeable or they are looking for other opportunities to get loot from the dungeon, so their goals aren't exactly the same as the person who previously had left the group. And so that person had left while the key was still in progress, and then the other four players are still there trying to either complete the key or they are forced to disband because they are no longer able to complete the key. And leaving happens for a multitude of reasons, whether it be because you've wiped, whether it be because that person is not having fun, whether it be because that person is actively griefing your group. There's a multitude of reasons, and I've seen a lot of conversations and communication about what players believe that Blizzard should do to punish those who leave dungeons. And so let's look and talk about some of the levers and some potential lever solutions, and kind of what my thoughts are about the leaving key situation. I think first and foremost, some of the stuff that I've seen online is like, I know it's a community issue, but maybe a substantial loss in rating or extended lockout on the ability to be able to re-queue, or a lever type situation. That could be a solution for those who leave keys. In addition to that, I've seen, many posts on Reddit talking about levers, and basically they talk about like leaving games in League of Legends or leaving in like CSGO. Obviously, World of Warcraft is a fundamentally very different game than those, but they're talking about forcing you to have a vote system where you can agree to deplete the key, and then that allows players to leave the dungeon. That is a potential solution where you put the leave up for a vote, and if it is unanimously successful, then you agree to disband the key, as opposed to one player leaving the dungeon and then everybody else slowly trickling out as you leave. In addition to that, I've also seen a couple of other solutions where, logistically. Okay, so the second someone leaves, the timer stops, and the remaining members of the group, that you give them 15 minutes or whatever to fill the group and resume the key. Once everyone is in, the group leader can restart the time with an additional 2 to 5 minutes for travel for a summon, barring all the disclaimers posted at the start of the post. I don't see anything negative. A couple of posts are like this, where like, oh, we need punishments for people who leave keys because this is toxic for the game, for my gaming experience, and it is toxic for the player base. And some players do this thing where they join up in Group Finder, and then once the key starts, they leave before anything happens, forcing you to deplete your key. Let's talk about all this, talk about my thoughts on this. First and foremost, that situation that I just described, where somebody queues up into Group Finder and they leave right as the key starts, and they force you to deplete your key. If that's happening, you're an asshole. You're an asshole, and you should feel bad about doing that to people. Secondly, that really doesn't happen all too often. I've pugged somewhere north of like 200 keys this season, and realistically, I have not seen that. Obviously, I am one person, and this is anecdotal evidence. I haven't seen that. That doesn't happen all too often in the grand scheme of like World of Warcraft levers. In the real world, whenever people leave group, typically it happens after either one wipe or multiple wipes. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that the key is like depleted or something like that happens. It's definitely depleted when somebody leaves, though, in most situations. But normally, whenever somebody leaves, they typically believe that the key is depleted, or they're no longer having fun, and so they leave the dungeon. So now, my thoughts on this are actually kind of similar to some of the top posts that I've seen on Reddit. Is some keys deserve to be abandoned, and this is actually super based. I'm sorry, but this isn't an issue that needs to be solved. If I'm trying to push my key up to get a 20 for the week, and the group dies twice on Wise Mari, my key is not going up. So I will find a group that will push it up. I agree with this. I do not want to stay in this group. The real solution to the problem is to find a group of friends to play with who are all on the same page, and then you won't have this problem. Pugging is definitely one of the biggest issues, and like using the LFG tool. In coordinated groups or groups of my friends, we don't have our friend just leave in the middle of the key and leave us and lock us into it. The real solution is like having 4 other people that you enjoy playing with. And now this isn't a solution for all players, but this is certainly a solution for players who are really, really worried about people bricking their keys. Even if you just invite people off your friends list that you don't even necessarily have to get in voice with them. As long as you're not using the LFG tool, you definitely have more control over the people who you're bringing into your group. So I definitely don't think that you should ever force people to feel locked into doing the key, because the last thing I would ever want as a player is to feel trapped inside of a dungeon, like I'm not able to leave the group. So say we wipe on a boss, or we wipe a second time on a boss, and I'm in like a 4, and I am actually pugging an LFG, right? And I have 4 people in that party who are from a group, and then I'm the only person who is there, like not in that 4 stack, and say we wipe twice on a boss, I'm really not having fun at that point, and I'm kind of ready to leave. And if I have to like vote to disband and then they vote it down, I promise you I'm AFKing. And this may be toxic, but I promise you I'm AFKing, because the last thing I want to do is feel forced to do a dungeon whenever I'm no longer having fun. And I'm not willing to like leave a group before we wipe. My general rule on leaving is like, I don't leave a key before we wipe. But once I'm no longer having fun, I am certainly going to be looking to leave the key, because I am no longer having fun. Another post on Reddit says, every time I see an M+ leaver solution, it reminds me of a Corrupt a Wish game. And I think that this is like actually really good. So an icon that shows how many keys you have deserted in the last days. If granted, players will AFK until the timer runs out to avoid desertion. This is something that you could avoid. Like there's basically a lot of solutions that people propose, but there's a lot of faults with their solutions, because fundamentally World of Warcraft, LFG, like pugging M+ is, there's a lot wrong with it, right? And it, just because it's an MMO, it requires interactions with players, and it requires you to put trust into players, and if you're using LFG, that you don't know that they're going to be looking to complete your key. And there's like a vote option to agree to leave the key, so there's no penalty. If granted, 4 players hold 1 hostage and force them to stay in an unwinnable key. This sounds like misery. If that happened to me, I'd be so mad. Allow players to be invited to M+ once a dungeon is in progress to replace levers. Right before the last boss, can you imagine if somebody kicked, somebody who had lead kicks somebody and invites a friend to get gear? That'd be so toxic. I'd be so annoyed if the community evolved into that. And obviously toxic people happen where they do some weird shit where they're like, they start a dungeon and then they like will immediately leave the key to force you to deplete. And now I think that there is like a solution. I don't think that like necessarily keys below 16 should realistically deplete, because then at that point it allows you for some recourse. In addition to that, if you have some stuff that like goes wrong in the dungeon, you don't necessarily need to deplete a key below 16. But having this issue for people who are leaving dungeons is just not an issue that needs solving in the current landscape of World of Warcraft. And I think that all of the solutions that have been presented aren't that great. In addition to that, there isn't like a universally good solution to this. I mean, there's also like a fundamental issue where like in an MMO, you have to balance the people who are exclusively using LFG versus the people who are running uncoordinated 5-man groups at the exact same time. And so there has to be a balance where how are you devising a solution that works for them that also doesn't negatively impact the people who are, playing with their friends or playing with a 5 stack, and they are fully in control of like, okay, because sometimes I zone out of a key, but we're zoning out of the key because we messed it up on a 25 and we're going to a 24, like that kind of thing. And so how are you supposed to intertwine and make a system that works for both groups of people who have different interests in how they are playing the dungeons? Those are my thoughts. I'm interested in hearing your thoughts down in the comment section below, and I hope you guys all have a great rest of your day, and I will see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.